Revealed, the incredible letter that turned a CEO's life-changing perspective in 24 hours. Jason Monroe, the sleek CEO of a tech startup in Chicago's bustling suburbs, had long lost track of what truly mattered. His world revolved around conference calls, investment pitches, and the relentless pursuit of profit. Days blurred together like the lines of code on his computer screen. Meanwhile, his one lifeline, his mother Carol, dwelled in a modest apartment that felt like a ghost of his past. Unbeknownst to him, she dedicated her every breath to the dreams she once nurtured for him, a son destined for greatness. But for Jason, she had become a distant figure, a fading photograph in the background of his ambitious lens. Then one day, a letter arrived from Frank, the retired veteran who lived next door to Carol. Jason almost tossed it aside without a second thought. But as he read, Frank's words struck like a thunderclap. They told stories drenched in resilience and sacrifice, realities of losing a home after years of hard work. Frank's description of community and the warmth of neighbors supporting one another resonated deep within, igniting an ember of guilt for the emotional chasm that had grown between him and Carol. Suddenly, his boardroom accolades felt like hollow trophies, trophies won at the expense of the heart. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As summer sunburned the skyline, Jason reluctantly agreed to attend a community event organized by Carol. The moment he stepped into that familiar neighborhood, memories washed over him, a childhood filled with laughter and love. He felt the palpable pride in the room, witnessing those who embraced each other amidst their struggles, but stood conflicted. He was trapped between ambition and the values he once held dear. Then, disaster struck. In a misguided attempt to support Frank during the event, a small gesture turned into a confusing debacle. Murmurs swept through the crowd, a wave of divided opinions crashing onto the shores of camaraderie. Jason felt their eyes piercing him, anger and disappointment simmering. Once cloaked in the luxury of the boardroom, he now faced the sting of accountability. With Frank's letter echoing in the back of his mind, Jason felt something shift within. Here among the community he once belonged to, he encountered long-buried prejudices and assumptions. It was time to confront the hardened shell he had constructed around himself, a shell that was beginning to crack. As he stood on the precipice of self-discovery, he conceived a plan to help Frank, envisioning a way to turn the tide. But when he presented his plan to the board, he was met with resentment. This isn't our market. They snapped, dismissing his vision like old news. As frustration boiled within him, Jason stared at the messy chaos he inadvertently created. Instead of a path forward, he faced a crossroads. Should he choose the path of ambition or a return to the roots he so desperately needed? Time was running out, and with every tick of the clock, the weight of his decision loomed larger. Jason stood in the sleek corporate office, the walls adorned with accolades and awards, feeling smaller than ever. He could almost hear the distant echoes of the community event, the laughter, and the unity that had filled the room. The contrast to his sterile world was stark. Uncertainty swelled in his chest like a tidal wave, one that threatened to crash down on him with every heartbeat. Why are you wasting our resources on this? It won't benefit us, shouted Paul, one of his board members, his irritation palpable. It was a sentiment that Jason had half expected, yet it didn't hurt any less. This was a defining moment. As he glanced around the room, he saw the faces of his colleagues, each one reflecting a singular reality. They were driven, ambitious, and entirely focused on profit margins and shareholder value. But at what cost? An image of his mother flashed through his mind. Even in her modest apartment, she had sacrificed so much for him. In those moments spent with Frank, listening to stories of camaraderie and resilience, he had remembered the warmth of community, the essence of who he had once been. He took a deep breath, steadying his resolve. "It's about more than profits," he countered, his voice shaking but filled with newfound determination. "It's about impact. We have the resources to change lives. If we combine our technology with the needs of our community, we can redefine success." Their faces shifted from disbelief to skepticism. Jason pressed on, passion surging. "Imagine a program that not only supports veterans like Frank but also connects them with tech solutions that make them thrive. This isn't just business, it's a chance to leave a legacy." But the wall of resistance remained firm. "You're losing your focus, Jason," said another board member, disappointment lacing her tone. "You've built this company for success. Don't jeopardize it for some community project." Jason felt the ground shift beneath him. In that moment, he had a choice to make: fight for the roots that still held pieces of his heart or continue on a path that felt increasingly alien and hollow. The clock was ticking, and frustration twisted his gut. After the meeting, Jason found himself wandering the city streets, each step echoing his internal debate. The skyline loomed above him, impressive yet isolating. He passed a group of children playing tag, their laughter mingling with the summer air, and for the first time in a long time, he felt that familiar ache for connection. He slipped into a nearby coffee shop, the scent of roasted beans and pastries drawing him in like a moth to a flame. As he waited in line, he overheard a conversation at the next table. A woman, frustrated, spoke about how her neighbor couldn't afford to repair his roof after a storm. The word struck a chord deep within him. What if he fostered innovation not just in tech but in compassion? What if he opened his heart, risking everything for a chance to change the lives of those around him? As that thought crystallized, he felt a glimmer of hope, a seed that had been dormant for too long. But where would he begin? What would it take to confront his company and the status quo, to balance ambition with compassion? With a new fire igniting his purpose, Jason left the cafe, but the echoes of the boardroom stayed with him. Suddenly, he knew that he had to confront them again. He needed to find a way to bring others into his vision, a plan that not only benefited the company but restored his connection to the community he had lost. The road would be arduous, and he could already sense the resistance coming. But that was the very essence of the journey ahead. How far was he willing to go? As he turned the corner, ready to face the board again, one thought resonated in his mind: what would happen if success wasn't just about the bottom line, but about the lives he could uplift? The stakes were higher than ever, and as he stepped back into the world of his making, Jason sensed that a revolution was brewing, within himself. Jason's heart raced as he approached the office building the next morning. The sun was just rising, casting a golden glow over the city, but to him, it felt like a spotlight illuminating his impending challenge. He could almost hear the rhythmic pounding of his heart echoing in his ears, a thundering reminder of the impending confrontation with his board. He strode into the office with his vision clear. He wouldn't just talk about his idea. He'd show them. Gathering all his notes, Jason assembled a presentation that not only highlighted the potential for profit but also showcased tangible benefits for the community. He spent hours crafting a vision that intertwined corporate objectives with community upliftment, making it impossible to ignore. Every time he felt doubt creeping in, he remembered the laughter of the children and the burden of the woman's neighbor without a roof. He couldn't let their stories fade from his heart. As the clock ticked closer to the meeting, he felt the tremor of nerves but also the courage pushing him forward. When he stood before the board, the skeptical faces of his colleagues greeted him, and he sensed the resistance thickening the air. But this was at the moment he prepared for. "Thank you for convening," he began, locking eyes with Paul, who had shouted at him the day before. "I know I'm asking for a lot, in fact, some might say I'm being reckless. But what if I could show you that we can be more than just a successful corporation?" He projected slides onto the wall. Statistics and infographics showed success rates of companies that took an active role in their communities. As he moved through his presentation, he emphasized the stories that had sparked the changes in him. Their faces softened slightly, curiosity began to break through skepticism. "This is Frank," he said, flipping to a picture of the veteran in his cap and gown, a wide grin plastered on his face during the community event. He's not just a statistic. He's a father, a neighbor, and a soldier who deserves our support. Imagine if we created a mentorship platform, pairing veterans with tech-based solutions. They'd not only learn skills but would also become part of a network that values them. He continued, his excitement building as he shared anecdotes of others who had benefited from similar programs across the country. As passion filled his voice, he could see nods among the board members. But then Paul interjected, "You're still putting too much on community outreach. What's the guarantee this pays off?" Jason took a breath, remembering the conversation from the coffee shop. What if we don't need an immediate guarantee? What if, for once, we lead with our hearts? Success doesn't have to be about numbers. Let's start with a pilot program. If it doesn't work, we can pivot, he offered, maintaining eye contact. An unexpected silence enveloped the room. Jason could see how each individual grappled with the tension between profit and purpose. It was evident some were conflicted, but he could feel the wheels of change beginning to spin. After the meeting, he stepped outside, the air feeling different. Hope swirled in his chest like a small fire, waiting for the right moment to ignite. As he walked back to his office, he noticed a letter peeking out from under his door. His heart raced as he opened it. It was from Frank, thanking him for everything he had done and sharing his own story about finding purpose after service. Frank's words hit him hard, affirming everything he was trying to fight for. Striding back to his desk, Jason thought of the impact that letter might have if shared with the board. Suddenly, clarity washed over him. He needed to gather real voices, real stories. He envisioned an event where beneficiaries could share their experiences firsthand. With renewed determination, he drafted an email inviting Frank and others to speak before the board. Would this be the turning point he had been searching for? Would they finally understand the heartfelt motivation behind his dream? Jason sent the email, heart pounding in anticipation. He knew he was racing towards something monumental, but would his fellow executives be ready to embrace the shift? As he stared out over the city skyline, an undeniable question loomed in his mind: was he brave enough to lead this charge, even if it meant challenging everything he had built so far? The days leading up to the event felt like a whirlwind. Jason was a bundle of nerves mixed with excitement. As he dove into planning, there was so much to coordinate: the venue, the speakers, the promotional materials. Each task reminded him of the stakes involved, the delicate balance between corporate ambition and genuine impact. He pored over his notes, tweaking his pitch until it felt right. Each adjustment was a step toward the ultimate goal, and he envisioned every detail in vivid color: Frank standing at the podium, sharing his story. The glimmer in the eyes of the board members as they connected with the humanity behind the numbers. Finally, the day arrived. The event space buzzed with an energized anticipation, decorated with banners that displayed the motto Jason had chosen: empower, inspire, transform. He took a deep breath as he entered, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Sitting in a pool of anxious thoughts, he waited for the audience to fill the seats. There was a mixed crowd: executives, community leaders, and a handful of veterans, each person radiating their own stories and experiences. When the event kicked off, Jason stood backstage, watching as Frank and the others took turns sharing. Their words shook the ground beneath him, resonating with pain and hope. Frank spoke of life after service, the struggles that plagued his every day, and the joy he felt when he found purpose. It was raw and authentic, igniting emotions not just in Jason but in everyone who listened. Each speaker brought their own flavor of resilience. A mother of two who had faced homelessness spoke with power, her voice trembling only slightly. She shared how community support had lifted her back up. The audience responded, visibly moved. Jason felt a pull in his chest, a deep, undesirable urge to leap onto the stage and shout that this was why they needed to change. As the event progressed, Jason began to see the doubts on the faces of the board members dissipate. He recognized them shifting, the barriers they had built beginning to crumble like old bricks. He felt a rush of hope draw him forward. But as soon as it was his turn to speak, the pressure mounted again. He stepped into the spotlight, the eyes of the crowd narrowing in eager anticipation. He began by recalling the stories shared, trying to weave them into a narrative that clearly linked to the company's vision. Today, you've heard real stories that illustrate the power of what we can accomplish together, he said, his voice strong but tinged with vulnerability. This isn't just about profit anymore. This is about our legacy as a company. Imagine being part of something bigger, where our success is measured not only by numbers but by lives changed. The moment felt electrifying. He could feel the energy shifting in the room, a collective breath being held as they grappled with his words. He leaned into the excitement, pushing through, driven by the belief that they could truly make a difference. But then, just as he started to believe he had them, someone from the back interjected, a doubt clawing its way into the conversation. It was Paul. "This all sounds good, Jason," he said, skepticism coloring his tone. "But how do we know this isn't just a nice story? What's the actual plan?" The air grew heavy with tension once more. Jason's heart raced, and he had to fight to keep his composure. Would his vision withstand the scrutiny? He took a deep breath, the words he had prepared slipping away. Instead, he answered honestly. "I don't have all the answers, Paul. But what I do have is the courage to take the first step. If we fail, we'll learn from it. But if we succeed, we could redefine our purpose." The room fell silent. Every eye was on him. Jason's stomach churned with anticipation, but he stood firm, ready to embrace whatever came next. Would his vulnerable honesty change the hearts of those in the room, or would the doubt drown out the potential? In that charged silence, one truth rang loudest in his mind: sometimes the fight for change begins in the most unexpected moments. What would they choose to do next? Jason stood still, feeling the weight of every gaze upon him. The air felt thick, charged with uncertainty, but he pressed on. "We have the chance to be leaders, not just in the market, but in our communities. Together, we can change lives. That's what sets us apart." He searched the crowd for something: hope. Support. It was hard to tell through the sea of expressions. He caught Frank's eye again, and in that fleeting moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Frank had battled his demons. He had fought hard to find his purpose. They both knew the fight was worth it. Then, in a moment that felt like a small eternity, Paul shifted in his seat, his brows knitting together. "And how do you plan to measure this change? What if we don't see a return on investment?" Jason felt the ground shift beneath him. Those words echoed with every fear he had tried to drown out. He swallowed hard, drawing on the stories he had just heard. "We measure it in lives touched, Paul. In partnerships formed with organizations that support our veterans, our schools, our communities. We'll gather data, we'll survey, we'll track our progress. But more importantly, we'll show up for those who need us and for one another." A ripple of murmurs swept through the audience. He wasn't just talking metrics anymore, he was speaking to their hearts, to the humanity they sometimes overlooked in boardrooms and conference calls. But then came Gabrielle, another board member known for her sharp tongue. "That sounds idealistic, Jason. Everyone wants to feel good about their contributions, but reality is much harsher. We have shareholders to answer to." Jason could feel the heat rising in his chest, but he remained steadfast. "I get that, Gabrielle. But imagine presenting to our shareholders not just a spreadsheet, but a narrative of hope. What if we showed them how our involvement changed the narrative for someone who was once lost? Wouldn't that be worth the risk?" For the first time, he saw a flicker of intrigue in her eyes. Just a flicker, but it felt monumental. Hope surged within him, a quiet fire blazing against the shadows of doubt. The conversation shifted, and soon others chimed in. Some voiced their concerns while others, surprising even Jason, began to express support. Every voice became a new thread woven into the fabric of the vision he was attempting to create. As he answered each question, his confidence grew. Jason opened up about the stories they hadn't heard yet, how this movement could inspire future generations to commit to service, to compassion, to recognizing the value of every life touched by their decisions. But just when he thought he'd won the room over, Paul raised his hand again, this time hesitating. What if this was more than just a company initiative? His voice was softer now, as if he was allowing the idea to form. What if we rallied our employees to share their stories too, to get involved? A wave of excitement washed over Jason. Exactly. This is about more than us. It's about all of us leading from wherever we stand. As the room vibrated with energy, Jason noticed the corner of Frank's mouth twitching upward, a smile, a spark of belief. It reassured him. They were on the verge of something bigger, a movement that transcended profits and balance sheets. But just as they all leaned into the idea, the lights flickered. The sound system crackled. An unease washed over the crowd, momentarily breaking the spell. "What is happening?" someone whispered. Jason's heart raced again. Could something disrupt their momentum now? He held his breath. And then, the lights went out, completely plunging the room into darkness. An unsettling silence blanketed the space. Jason glanced around, panic clawing at him. He had built something here, he'd seen the glimmers of transformation. What had been igniting hope is now forced into uncertainty. Would the spark fizzle in the dark? Would they see where this could lead or shrink back? Fumbling voices filled the gap, and Jason's mind raced. How can they rally in the dark? What will this moment reveal? The darkness felt heavy, almost suffocating. Even though they were all in the same room, the absence of light turned Jason's gaze inward, questioning if the flickering hope he had ignited was enough. He could hear the shuffle of chairs, anxious whispers, and the scuffle of feet as people shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't just a power outage. It felt like a metaphor for the uncertainty that clung to their ambitious vision. Jason felt a bead of sweat trickle down his back. "Can everyone hear me?" he called out, his voice breaking the silence. A few murmurs floated back, affirming that they were still there, still listening. He couldn't let them down. "Not now. I know it's dark. But remember, the most powerful ideas can shine the brightest against the bleakest backdrops. We need to have faith in this vision, even when we can't see it clearly." "Faith?" Gabriel's voice sliced through the dark. "Faith doesn't pay the bills, Jason." "True," he responded, feeling the urgency in her tone. "But what if we all pulled together, shared our fears, our thoughts, and even our successes? What if we turned this moment of darkness into a glimpse of what true unity looks like?" There was a pause, and then Frank spoke up. "He's right. We don't need the lights to see each other. We just need to be real." Suddenly, someone from the back shouted, "Let us share our stories. It's what we wanted to do, right?" A ripple of agreement spread, and one by one, voices began to rise. Stories poured out in the dark, stories of struggles and triumphs, moments when they felt lost and were later found. It was cathartic, like a release valve opening to let years of pent-up emotions flow freely. Each story added strength to the fragile web of hope they were trying to weave. Jason felt his heart swell. This was the transformation he had been speaking about. In those moments of vulnerability, the atmosphere shifted. They were no longer just board members, they were individuals connected by shared experiences, by the simple beauty of human resilience. Gabriel's voice cracked, as she shared her struggles with a tricky family situation. "I thought I had to shoulder it alone. But finding my voice among you, it's like a weight has been lifted. I didn't expect that." Then Paul stood, his voice shaking slightly. "And here I thought I was alone with my doubts. If we can be honest and rally together, maybe we can face the outside world." As more stories bubbled up, Jason could sense the momentum shifting, a collective spark igniting. It was tangible, almost electric against the backdrop of the dark. Hope was not just a mere idea anymore, it was a living, breathing thing in that room. And then, just as the last story was shared, the lights flickered back on. They illuminated the faces of those gathered, some with tears of joy, some with smiles that reached their eyes. Jason felt as if they had crossed some invisible threshold. He took a moment, absorbing the sight. "Look at us," he said, a smile breaking across his face. "Even in the dark, we lit our own way. Imagine what we can do when the lights are on." Cheers erupted, their energy reverberating off the walls. But just as the excitement escalated, Jason noticed a figure standing mute at the back of the room. Meredith, a recent hire whose quiet demeanor usually went unnoticed. She hadn't spoken through the entire meeting, and the look in her eyes was unreadable. "What's on your mind?" he asked, inviting her in. The crowd quieted, all eyes turning towards her. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. "I think we're missing a crucial piece. This vision, it needs to be bigger than just us." The room fell silent. Was this a warning, or was she about to offer something profoundly new? Jason's heartbeat quickened. What revelation was about to unfold? How much further could they take this movement? Meredith stood there, framed by the light now flooding the room, her hesitant yet determined posture demanding attention. The silence pressed in, making every heartbeat resonate in the confined space. Jason could see the flicker of resolve growing in her eyes. "What do you mean it needs to be bigger?" Jason prompted gently. He sensed the weight of her words, ready to embrace whatever insight she was about to deliver. She took a step closer, her hands nervously clasped together. "I mean, we can't just focus on ourselves or our organization. There's a whole world out there that needs what we've experienced. What if we help others? We could bring this light to those in the dark." The crowd leaned in, intrigued. Jason felt a rush of emotion swell inside him. He understood what she meant. This wasn't merely about shifting their internal culture or building up their own community. It was about reaching out and touching lives beyond the walls of their own struggles. Gabrielle's eyes widened, and she raised her hand. "You're right. None of us got through our battles alone. We all had someone, or something, to help illuminate the path. Let's empower those who don't have that support." Paul nodded vigorously. "We could start workshops, outreach programs, anything. Just think of the impact we can have." The excitement in his voice was infectious, and Jason could feel the energy of the room pulsating around them. But Jason's mind raced with implications. It wasn't just about new initiatives. What responsibilities came with this mission? How far were they willing to extend their reach? He had to be careful, there were real lives involved in this kind of vision. "Hold on a second," he intervened, his brow furrowed with contemplation. "This is huge. We need to ensure we're grounded. We can't stretch ourselves too thin. We can't lose what we've just started to build." Meredith's expression shifted from one of worry to confidence. "I understand. But maybe that's why we start small. We can find local groups or organizations that align with our values, our stories. We can help them one by one. Just like how we helped each other tonight." For a brief moment, everything else faded into insignificance. The room transformed into a sanctuary of possibility, where courage flowed freely in the wake of shared experiences. Jason felt the tug of potential, and buried deep within was a flicker of fear at the vastness of their new vision. A voice piped in from the side, interrupting his thoughts. "What if we organized a community event? Something that showcases our work and allows us to invite others who have faced similar challenges." It was one of the quieter board members, Anna, speaking up for the first time. As excitement erupted again, Jason felt a knot in his stomach tighten. Ideas began to swirl, each more grandiose than the last. A part of him was ecstatic, another part felt the looming weight of responsibility. They were all passionate, and this energy had the potential to uplift others. But would it all backfire? He raised his hand, grounding the enthusiasm. "Before we dive in, let us take a moment to outline our mission, our values. We must ensure that whatever we decide comes from a place of genuine empathy, not just ambition. Exactly. Frank shouted, eyes shining. This could be the turning point we need to actually give back. As the discussions began to morph into plans, Jason listened, feeling like an observer caught between hope and hesitation. Did they have clarity? Did they truly understand the depth of the work they were aiming to take on? The lights were fully restored now, but as conversations buzzed around him, he couldn't shake the uncertainty, the tugging at the back of his mind that this expansive dream could become a burden if not approached with care. Could they really manage this growth? And then Meredith spoke again, her voice cutting through the excitement. What if we don't just help others, but also open ourselves up to learning from them? Each struggle gives us insight. This could be a two-way street. Jason's heart raced at her words. He sensed a pivotal shift on the horizon, one that had the power to redefine everything. But as he looked around at the eager faces, anticipation coursing through the room, he had to wonder, would they be ready for what came next? Excitement buzzed like electricity in the air. Ideas bounced around the room, each one igniting another. Jason took a deep breath, forcing himself to drown out the chatter, just for a moment. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever, and he needed clarity. He scanned their faces. Each person wore a mix of hope and determination, but he could see shadows lurking in their eyes, the same shadows he felt in his own heart. What if this wasn't just about outreach or inspiration? What if their well-meaning intentions led to pitfalls they weren't prepared for? Okay, everyone, Jason finally said, cutting through the frenetic energy. Everyone turned to him, the room quieting down as they sensed the shift. We need to ask some tough questions before we leap into this. Meredith stepped closer, her brow furrowed. Like what? Like, how can we ensure that we're genuinely helping others and not just trying to pat ourselves on the back? And how do we make sure we're not overwhelming ourselves with a mission that's bigger than we are? The room fell silent again, the words hanging heavy in the air. He could see them absorbing the seriousness of what he was saying. They weren't just a group of survivors anymore, they were stepping towards something bigger, something that had real stakes. Gabrielle tapped her pen against her notebook, her expression pensive yet focused. I think we need to set clear objectives. We can't just dive in without a roadmap. A roadmap, Frank echoed, nodding. What about creating a committee to help steer this project? We can create a plan, establish goals, and assess our capacity. If we start small, we can gradually expand responsibly. Jason felt a flicker of relief. They were all purposefully shifting their focus back. It reminded him of how critical it was to be united in vision and intent. Yes. And we can also reach out to other organizations that have experience in outreach programs. We could learn from them. I know a couple of groups that might be open to collaborating, Anna said, her voice rising with enthusiasm. They've been successful in similar projects, and we get first-hand knowledge. Meredith smiled, the light returning to her eyes. See? We can do this. We take what we've learned, share it, and build connections that strengthen our community. As the conversation flowed again, Jason felt a palpable shift. They were no longer just navigating their internal struggles, they were ready to face the world outside, together. But beneath the excitement, doubt still lingered. What if they weren't enough? What if their willingness to take on more shadows their initial success? Team, he raised his voice once more, what if we draft a letter? We could outline our intent, our mission, and maybe start a conversation with a few local groups. It would keep us accountable right from the start. Brilliant idea. Meredith exclaimed, her face lit up. We could even invite responses, like a call to action. This way, we're not just giving but gaining insight right from the beginning. Just then, a silence washed over the room again. This felt different. A collective realization hung in the air that they were forging ahead into unknown territory, bound not only by shared experiences but also by newfound aspirations. Before anyone could voice the uncertainty rushing through Jason's mind, Meredith interrupted again, her voice steady. Let us promise each other to keep it honest and real. We have to remind ourselves why we started this. We can't lose sight of our mission. Paul raised his fist in agreement. To light the way. A chorus of affirmations followed, echoing Jason's mix of hope and fear. He couldn't ignore the tension in his chest, but it didn't matter. The plan was unfolding, and perhaps this was the spark they needed to strengthen their bond. But something nagged at him. How would the world respond to their call? As the night drew on and they settled into a plan, one question crept into Jason's thoughts: was this all just a self-fulfilling prophecy, or could they truly make a difference in the lives of others? And then, as if summoned by his insecurities, a text pinged on his phone. It flashed on the screen, too bright and urgent: we need to talk. Jason's heart sank as he recognized the number. This could change everything again. Jason stared at the screen, his heart racing. The message was from his former mentor, Brian. They hadn't spoken in months. Not since that last awkward meeting where Brian had dismissed Jason's ambitions as naive. Jason hesitated, a whirlwind of emotions crashing over him. What could he possibly say? The conversation in the room faded into the background as he contemplated the implications. Many in the group relied on Jason's leadership, they saw him as the backbone of their plans. But everything felt shaky with Brian's message looming in his mind. Did he really want to open this door? Hey, Jay. Meredith's cheerful voice broke through his thoughts. You alright? He looked up, forcing a smile. Yeah, just thinking about some logistics. Logistics? Paul chimed in. You're overthinking again. This is a new beginning. Focus on the excitement. Jason nodded, but his mind was still with the text. The idea of reaching out felt like tethering a lifeline to a stormy sea. Should he respond? What if Brian dismissed his resolve to pursue this outreach mission? The weight of uncertainty wrapped around him, relentless. All right, let us tackle that letter, he said, trying to redirect his own spiraling thoughts. He knew he had to focus on the group, on their shared mission. If we include what we've discussed tonight, it could really resonate with others. Gabrielle took the lead, jotting down points as they spoke, her enthusiasm infectious. We can say how we're committed to making a difference and show that this isn't just talk. We're ready to act. Real momentum built in the room again, and Jason observed each person's face. Hope and passion lit them up like stars against a dark night. They were all in this together. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the conversation with Brian hung like a dark cloud above him. Hours slipped away, and their collective energy filled the space. Jason found himself caught up in the laughter and ideas, pulling him further from his worries. They discussed outreach strategies, including workshops and community cleanups. Everyone was buzzing, all except for Jason, who kept glancing at his phone. Finally, as the clock ticked past midnight, the group agreed on a draft that everyone felt proud of. Jason felt a swell of pride himself but remained haunted by Brian's text. Let us prioritize sending this letter out in the morning, Meredith said, gathering her bag. We have to get our voice out there. As everyone began to wrap things up, Jason decided he couldn't keep dodging the issue. Hey guys, I'll catch up in a minute. I just have to respond to something quickly. With shaky hands, he opened a new message to Brian, his heart racing again. He typed, "Can we talk? I want to share something important." It felt risky. What if this conversation was just another dead end? But he hit send anyway, hoping this could shift everything. The response came in a handful of minutes. When? Jason stared at the screen, a thrill of anticipation mixed with dread swirling inside him. As he looked back around the room, now mostly empty, a thought crossed his mind. This meeting could change everything, both for himself and for the mission he was committed to. What would Brian say? Would this conversation push him further toward his goals or pull him back into doubt? Jason exhaled slowly, the path ahead unclear. But one thing lingered in the air, a pulse of uncertainty that matched the rhythm of his heart. As morning crept closer, he wondered, could reaching out to the past forge a new future? Jason woke with a jolt, the sunlight streaming through his window felt like a spotlight, demanding attention. He looked at his phone. No new messages from Brian yet. Uncertainty wove itself tightly around his morning routine, almost choking the fresh energy from last night's gathering. He recalled the faces illuminated by hope as they shared their stories. That spark had ignited something inside him, an undeniable urge to reach beyond himself. The mission was clear, to uplift lives while remaining anchored to their values. But, would Brian's input shatter that vision, or enhance it? As he prepared for the day, thoughts spiraled. The clock ticked cruelly, echoing the weight of his decisions. What impact could one man have on the resounding mission? Jason shook his head, chasing the doubt away momentarily. He couldn't let the fear of the unknown loom larger than the possibilities ahead. By midday, he couldn't bear the weight any longer. He reached for his phone again. With a single breath, he sent a text to Brian, "Let's meet at 3 p.m. at Harlow's." The bustling cafe was familiar turf, filled with conversations, laughter, and the comforting aroma of coffee. When 3 p.m. rolled around, Jason arrived early, his nervous energy bubbling beneath a thin veneer of calm. He ordered a coffee and settled into a corner booth, hoping that clarity would come whether Brian agreed with him or not. A mix of anticipation and anxiety gnawed at him. Just as he took a decisive sip, the door swung open, and in walked Brian, his signature suit radiating confidence. Jason stood, adrenaline flooding through him as Brian approached. "It's been a while," Brian said, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "It has. I've been doing a lot of thinking." Jason hesitated, searching for the right words. Here was the man he admired yet feared. "I'm getting ready to push the company in a new direction." Brian raised an eyebrow, intrigued, but alert. "And what direction is that?" Jason took the plunge. "I want to integrate more community initiatives, to really make a difference. We need to connect with the people around us to help those like Frank, to create mentorships for veterans." His words flowed with growing passion. He needed Brian to understand, he needed his support. Brian leaned back, a bemused look crossing his face. "That sounds noble, Jason. But find me in the details. What's the bottom line here?" The skepticism hinted at the battle still to come. Instead of retreating, Jason pressed on. "This could redefine success for us. Imagine our company being known not just for profits, but as a catalyst for real change. We can show the world how tech can improve lives. It's a win-win." Brian regarded him thoughtfully, fingers tapping on the table, lost in contemplation. "But it's risky. The shareholders won't take kindly to anything that disrupts profits." Jason nodded but refused to let frustration ebb into his voice. "What if we could prove that compassion and community involvement can fuel growth? What if shareholder value aligned with humanity?" A flicker of interest ignited in Brian's eyes. "You'd need metrics, case studies, data evidence that proves this works." "Yes. That's why I'm hoping to gather stories from those we've helped. To turn empathy into action." Brian smiled, a genuine spark lighting his gaze. "Now you're talking." But then Jason hesitated, an overwhelming thought surfacing. "But if you're not on board, this might not go anywhere." "Let's not be hasty," Brian replied, suddenly serious. "Schedule a meeting with your board. I'll come in and present with you. If you can gather people's stories and numbers, I'll back this initiative on the condition we keep sight of our core values first. I want to let you steer this ship into uncharted waters without a compass." Jason's spirits soared. It felt like the pieces were clicking into place, a new alliance forged in shared purpose. "Thank you, Brian, that means a lot," he replied, feeling like a weight lifted. As they wrapped up, plans set in motion, Jason felt something shift inside him. He wasn't alone in this fight. Back at the office, the atmosphere was electric. Scattered in the boardroom, the same faces stirred with excitement and realization upon hearing Jason's news. "Brian's coming onto our side," he announced. Gasps followed, curiosity bubbling like water about to boil. Jason laid out his vision, emphasizing that the meeting wouldn't be just about numbers, but stories. He could feel the anticipation growing. "We're preparing to confront what our values mean and how we can uplift others," he said. As the day waned, the whirlwind of nervous energy solidified into laser focus. Ideas morphed into plans, research into data to gather, stories to tell. Jason had found the backbone of something significant, and it felt amazing. Days turned into weeks. Preparations intensified, a fabric woven from hope and commitment. The board meeting day arrived, and Jason stood before the panel along with Brian. The air crackled with excitement while Jason introduced the initiative, highlighted the stories of Frank, the many veterans, and his commitment. Brian, supporting him, spoke about the metrics that guaranteed loyalty and growth, intertwining the mission's heart with solid numbers. As he wrapped up, Jason took a deep breath, ready to answer questions. "Can we truly balance compassion and profits?" someone asked. "Absolutely," he replied, voices echoing optimism in unison. "That's the goal. To transform lives and redefine business success." As discussions unfolded, hope spread. They engaged in passionate conversations not just about profit, but about community impact. At the end of it all, a vote loomed, and as it passed, waves of relief washed over Jason. They were now a company committed to making a real difference. After the intense discussions concluded, Jason walked outside, basking in the sunlight. It felt like a revelation had taken place, not only for the company but within himself. He felt whole, alive, and connected to the world around him. Every conversation with Frank, every shared story led to this. This was only the beginning, not just for the company but his own journey, rediscovering the passion, and returning to his roots. His heart was no longer tied to the confines of the boardroom but blossomed in the midst of possibility. The past had shaped him, but the future was now within reach. And just like that, his phone buzzed with a message from Frank: "Proud of you, Jason. Let's keep spreading light." Jason's heart swelled with joy, knowing that together they could cultivate a movement that had the power to change lives. Hope thrummed in his veins, whispering about the adventures that lay ahead. Today was the start, not just for him, but for everyone ready to rise. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep the vibes flowing. Comment your reactions and feelings about this ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. This is the moment to show your support. It's never been more crucial. Don't wait not even one more second to share. True fans like you understand the importance of standing up together. Let's keep this momentum going.